So you may wonder why we chose a reading in these sweet June days that takes us back to frosty grass and the garden's dormant splendor. You know, it's easy to say yes, yes to life, and thank you, thank you, thank you, and find delight when the ground is warm and the earth is giving us the gift of strawberries and marigolds. But when life feels cold and when you feel alienated from the promise of its warmth, this is the time to flex our muscles of practicing joy and tending to delight. Unlike E.B. White, Ross Gay does not seem to be torn between responding to the seductiveness of the world and responding to its challenges. I don't think he even considers it a choice. He does both. Because his response to the challenges and all the terrible things that are happening out there is to exalt and adore and to love the world. How many of you have heard of Ross Gay? Okay, good. I mean, he's popular. You know, this book is a New York Times bestseller. He's a National Book Award finalist and has many other awards, and he's been interviewed many times. His parents were one of the very first interracial couples who were legally allowed to marry after the 1967 decision by the Supreme Court, Loving versus the state of Virginia. His parents labored all their lives doing mostly hourly jobs at fast food restaurants and retail stores. And all the while, they were able to tend to delight. Even though they came from people for whom the world was collapsing, they came from people who had to flee. And yet, there was this cultivation of joy. Like many of us, Ross has grown more and more disturbed by the upward transfer of wealth and truly worried about the collapse of democracy and the collapse of our society as we know it. And so as a response, he started to study how people survived in the past. I mean, surely people have gone through devastating times in the past. We know that. And so he studied the source of human resilience in the face of profound brutality. How did they make it? He wondered to himself. How did they not just curl up into a little ball? How did they not just collapse under the weight of their own despair? And what he found was that they stubbornly incited joy and delight wherever they could. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, Ross Gay, on his 42nd birthday, decided to take on a project where he would write short essays every single day for 1 whole year about whatever delighted him that day. He practiced observing, he practiced paying attention. And you know this, whatever you put your attention on grows stronger, right? Whatever you pay attention to, you notice more in the world. It's the blue car theory, something about cognitive bias. And the same is true on the opposite spectrum, right? If you pay attention a lot every day to what is despairing and terrible in the world, you will see more of that and more of that. You'll get good at noticing the terrible stuff. And that's the muscle that you're going to develop. So before I move on too quickly, I just want to tackle these two words. There's delight and there's joy, right? And there is a difference, a slight difference, but to me it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this sermon. Joy is a basic human emotion, right, along with fear and sadness and anger and surprise. Joy is a feeling that can range from just kind of pleased to enthralled. And then delight, if you go back to its Latin roots, it just means that something that can turn you toward pleasure. You know, the thing that turns your head and incites this feeling of joy. In this collection, Ross is lured away toward the pleasure of lights and the way they dance in a room. He is turned toward the little curl that he notices that bounces off someone's forehead as he's talking to them. He finds delight in the spontaneous physical touch that happens between two people who haven't seen each other in a long time. Joy and delight, they're so intermingled that I'm just going to, if you'll allow me, take the poet's lead and just use both of these words interchangeably, for they point in the same direction. They point toward the same territory. When the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, first came out with the Article 2 proposal, you know what I'm talking about, that proposed putting love in the center and proposed that a core theological value shared by most UUs is love. I had this one ministerial colleague who did a full body eye roll. You know what that is? Like, oh, give me a break. I have tried over my many years of preaching to make a distinction between love as it has been hijacked by Hallmark and Justin Bieber and the love that is preached by Jesus. But you know, Bieber is too strong, really. And love is still seen by most people as a very weak response to life's calling. And this is the same with joy and delight. Oh, what a superficial spiritual theme. An inadequate response to the world's many problems. Oh, we're going to delight in flowers and children today. How nice. Ross tells this story of a book reading that he was doing at a local bookstore, and a white woman approached him to ask a question which sounded to him like an accusation. How, she asked, as a black man living in this country, in this day and age, during this time, how can you write a book primarily about joy? But you know what? Ross isn't giving up, and I'm not going to give up either. I may not be able to articulate it very well today, but I just know in my gut that this is the path that I want to follow right now. I don't feel well about what is going on in the world, and I know a lot of you also do not feel well about what's happening out there. And I really do believe that it has something to do with the fact that we have become very alienated from each other. We can blame it on COVID, we can blame it on social media. Whatever the reason, I can feel the truth of this. We're taking sides. We're digging trenches. We're taking up arms. Arms either literally or arms with words on Twitter, right? We're fighting. We are fighting with each other. So certain of our righteousness and our rightness, we yell and we shout and we shoot. How could we possibly be joyful at a moment like this? How could we possibly take on delight as an antidote to all of this? Everything is awful. We have to stay vigilant. We have to read all the news. We have to have it playing in the background 24/7. We have to look at our news feeds all the time. We've got to keep up. We have to tend to our fear like a terrible thorn-filled bush that grows like a shield against our fellow human beings. We are good at fighting, Ross writes. We are so good at fighting. But imagining what is wonderful and imagining what is to be adored, to be preserved and exalted, that seems to be much harder for us. Fighting is easier than curiosity. Fighting is easier than empathy. Fighting is easier because that seems like all that we have all around us, right? Today's media is full of the worst of us, the worst of human behavior. And that's what sells. That's what grabs our attention, draws eyeballs, generates clicks. How in the world can those headlines compete with something like this scene noticed by Ross as he walked one day through the Denver airport? As I was climbing some steps, I noticed 4 women, uniformed, maybe kiosk workers taking a break, chatting, relaxing. One of them was gently arranging another woman's collar beneath her sweater, freeing it from the cardigan's neck, using both of her hands to jostle it free, the other, and seeming to spend a little more time than necessary, creasing the fold of the collar. And the other hand kind of resting on her shoulder, the two of them chatting the whole time, sitting, holding each other. My head twisting toward them like a sunflower as I finished the stairs and walked by. So in love was I with this common flourish of love, this everyday human light. Why? Why is it harder to tend to that kind of delight than it is to fight? The practice of delighting, tending to delight, it can be easy. Can be as easy as just paying attention to what lights up your soul, right? What catches your attention, what turns your head. But there's this other aspect of delighting in human relationships, in delighting in people, that requires some sort of engagement with the fact that delighting in one another also requires us to acknowledge death and suffering. if I can see that every single person I meet has something that they're struggling with, that they have suffered, that they are suffering, then it causes me to be more tender toward them. And when I am tender toward another person, I can delight in the way their nose wiggles. And I can delight in a certain gesture that they make, or the way they use a certain word. Ross writes, "It astonishes me sometimes, no, it astonishes me very often, how every person I get to know, everyone, regardless of everything, and by which I mean everything, lives with some profound personal sorrow. Brother addicted, mother murdered, dad died in surgery, rejected by their family, cancer is back, fetus not okay. Not to mention," he continues, "the existential sorrow that we all might be afflicted with, which is that we and all that we love will soon be annihilated." And so what he asks, if we join our sorrow, that is, what if we joined all that we love? What if that is joy? Joining our sorrows means first that we have to stop fighting against ourselves, that we have to stop avoiding the wilderness of our own sorrow. We have to stop fighting back the tears and pushing away all the uncomfortable feelings. There is so much distraction in the world, and you can avoid all of your negative feelings if you want to. But to allow ourselves to feel the truth of, oh my God, everyone in this room is going to die. You know? Everything that I love is going to perish. Everyone that I care about will die, and I am also going to die. If we can come to that basic fundamental truth and look at each other with that awareness, then, oh my goodness, how can we not be tender toward one another? We've got to stop fighting. And yes, we can say, siblings, let us love one another, which is easier said than done. I think maybe it's easier to say, siblings, I know you're suffering. I suffer too. Let's share our sorrows. Let's share our sorrows and find that those transform into joy and delight. I'll leave you with his words. The luminous mycelial tethers between us, our fundamental connection to one another, the raft through sorrow, the holding through grief that joy is, reminds us again and again that we belong not to an institution or to a party or to a state or to a marketplace. We belong to each other, needfully so. And this we must practice and study and sing and dance and story and dream and celebrate, belonging to each other as though our lives depended on it. Because, my friends, they do. Our lives do depend on that. May it be ever so. Amen, and blessed be.